Welcome back to the BoshNRoll channel. Today we are talking about the August 10th, 2026 Ban and Restricted update, the one that we have spent the last 6 weeks or so, however long it's been since Marvel Superheroes came out and gave us the Fantasticar, wondering, are they going to ban the Fantasticar? And guess what? They did. I'll talk about the entire announcement, but with, of course, a focus on the formats I mostly play, which are Legacy, Vintage, and Pauper. Standard, though, got a big shakeup. Badgermole Cub, Stormchaser Talent, and Gran all banned here. Badgermole Cub is a card that people have been calling to get banned since it was printed. It's interesting they took action now. Stormchaser's Talent, in a similar spot, people have been saying Badgermole Cub and Stormchaser's Talent for over a year, I feel like. It's been a very long time. Gran's an interesting one. No changes to Pioneer or Modern. Legacy, the Fantasticar is banned. Vintage, the Fantasticar is restricted. Pauper, no changes. And then, I don't know about these arena formats. If they apply to you, no changes there. First, I'll just talk about Standard kind of quickly. There's a lot written here, and basically the vibe is Badgermole Cub has been at the top of the metagame for a long time. The Badgermole Cub green decks and the blue-red spells decks are the two types of decks that have been miles ahead of the other decks for quite a while. But there was some diversity among green decks, there was some diversity among blue-red decks, and they weren't winning so much that it was a problem. But a new shell has emerged, this Selesnya offense deck, which they say in the article has Vivi or Nitier levels of dominance on Arena, which is a messed up bar to clear. And they wanted to handle this now before the upcoming standard RCQ season begins. Because in the past, they've made it clear they don't really want to ban stuff during an active RCQ season. They want you to be able to get a deck and know that you could play it for the season. We are also 6 months away from rotation of standard, which is a big deal. In the 3-year standard, the rotation happens less often. It's more dramatic when it does. And getting a little mix-up, shooting some life into it before the pre-rotation RCQ season makes some sense to me. And then they go into the blue-red spells decks. There are builds that use Stormchaser's Talent, and then there are builds that use Lessons. And Stormchaser's Talent they called out as a card that dominates both the early game and the late game, which is a messed up thing to do. The Stormchaser's Talent plus Boomerang Basics combo, you get a lot of power and toughness, you keep your hand full of cards very early, and then if your opponent fends all that off, you eventually start activating Chapter 2 of Stormchaser's Talent, and then you're buying back Flow States or buying back the Boomerang Basics to do it all over again. And one card that dominates both the early game and the late game makes sense for constricting the range of what these prowess decks can do. And then Gran is the other one. They called out recent Lessons control decks. Like, this isn't the Monument Lessons deck that won the Pro Tour a while back. This is like a Tablet of Discovery, Jeskai Revelation, Jeskai near creatureless control deck. Gran is the only creature in the deck, but it is very good, which means it's very hard to board out all your removal versus these decks and bring in a bunch of negates and stuff, which is what you'd want to be doing. You still have to adjust Gran or just get ranched by it some amount of the time. So they just got rid of Gran. That all makes sense to me. There are a lot more words here if you choose to read them, but that's not what I do primarily. Let's instead go down. Some words about Pioneer I didn't even read. That's not a format anymore. Sorry, Pioneer players. Modern, they called out how healthy the metagame looks after the recent Pro Tour. This Eldrazi Trudge deck. I have a 5-0 trophy coming out on the channel next week with this deck. I played it one time, won all my matches. It was pretty sweet. They called this one out as a cool new innovation. They called out Neoform as potentially concerning. They got their eye on it, but they're not taking action yet. But in general, they're happy with that. The speedrun continues. Legacy, Fantasticar is banned. Vintage, Fantasticar is restricted. Nothing. There are no additional words to read here. Instead, there is an invitation to view the weekly MTG, August 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, to discuss this change and more. This live stream is a few hours after this video comes out. I would have loved to view this live stream before I made this video to know what we were going to discuss and more, I guess. And I hope I'll be doing that along with a lot of you later today when this video releases, and we'll see what they're talking about. But that brings me to another strange thing that's happening, which is if we go instead from the English language announcement to the Japanese one, and this is translated automatically by Google Translate. So some of the words are kind of funny, e.g., Fantasticar, and that's going to be spelled at least 3 different ways throughout this article. There are full paragraphs of information here, which makes me curious why they would release this in Japanese but not in English. And hopefully it's just a clerical error, but this article has been up for almost 4 hours by the time I'm recording this, and they haven't been like, oh, oops, and added this to the English one. So it feels like it's on purpose at this point. Hopefully they address that in the live stream. The BoshNRoll channel is brought to you by Tales of Adventure. TOAMagic.com has almost 100,000 unique cards in stock. They offer free track shipping on every order, plus next day or 2-day options when you have an event coming up fast. They offer on-site pickup at major Magic events throughout the US, so you're never scrambling before your tournament. Stop by their booth to buy, sell, or trade at upcoming regional championships, Magic Con, Spotlight Series, and more. I love their selection of individually scanned high-end cards that show you exactly what you're buying. And the best part is saving 5% on every order with promo code BOSH. From Ancestral Recall to Zombie Master, get what you need quickly and in one place at TOAMagic.com. Eternal lives here. But for now, let's read this Japanese translation. First of all, they immediately say, Fantasticar stood out. They knew it would. It immediately captured the community's attention. Low-cost card, tremendous explosive power, etc., etc. Uses tools that are already established in Eternal formats. Yep, everything we said off the spoiler on that one. It did say here, which is interesting, it is their philosophy at Studio X, which is the Magic development studio. They're cautious about taking preemptive measures in Eternal format cards. With a wide range of tools that can answer specific strategies, many players, the appeal of Eternal formats lies in their higher power level. True. And that's something we've been talking about on the Eternal Glory podcast for these 6-8 weeks, whatever it's been, with the Fantasticar in the format, is that it has been a thrill, especially for the combo players out there, the Doomsday Innovators, the Storm Innovators, having this card, getting to play with it, enjoying the time they had with it, while also knowing it's probably out of bounds. It has been a thrill. And then seeing decks like the blue-white Felia Stifle deck emerge as a counterplay to this, because it has a bunch of cards in the main that are great against the Fantasticar. It has been fun to navigate this metagame, but that doesn't mean it's healthy, which is where they go next here. Fantastica, the second spelling in the article so far, has been adopted in such a wide variety of strategies that it has proven nearly impossible to deal with using a sufficient number of counter cards. They call out Doomsday, a deck that already plays Dark Ritual and is pretty good at casting a bunch of spells in a turn. Then they go to the Dimir card deck, which this article calls Uber, which I had never heard it called that before. It's just really freaking funny. Great job. Fantasticar brought phenomenal deck names. Vroomsday, Uber. There's a few other ones like Pontiac Firebird with the Phoenix hybrids. Like, there's a bunch of funny names out there. Carbelcher. That is a legacy that this card will hold forever. A great era of deck names. Anyway, this deck, Uber, this is the fair blue-black tempo deck that can also Fantasticar you. This is a deck that I called out specifically as most concerning to me during Eternal Glory podcasts and other times I've been talking about Fantasticar. Like, this stuff was clear. Like, your Dark Ritual decks that are trying to build Storm anyway, or cast a bunch of spells in a turn anyway, your Epic Storms, your Doomsdays, of course they're going to play the Fantasticar. But that makes them in some ways just weaker to cards like Deafening Silence, which already impact these decks. It's not a huge shift from what they're already doing, it's just kind of more of the same at the cost of other slots in their deck. But what concerned me, and what also apparently concerned Wizards of the Coast, is when these pseudo-fair decks can pick this up. Here they talk about, can you try to win the early game? When you play against this deck, can you beat it early? You have to get through Thoughtseize, Force of Will, Daze, all the stuff that blue decks just get. Can you beat it going long? Guess what? 4 Quantum Riddler in this build, Barrow-Goyf, a bunch of creatures that just draw cards will show up eventually if you go to the mat, empty your hand, stopping that early Fantasticar. This deck reloads easily, and maybe it even just boards out the cards, and now you have a bunch of Deafening Silences in your deck that you don't even care about. These decks are very concerning, and the article calls them out appropriately. They specifically compared this to the Entomb ban and how the Reanimator shell went from a turbo combo deck and got co-opted by the Wasteland Days Brainstorm Force of Will shell to make something unholy and not reasonable for the format. Then they go on to talk about these colorless Stompy decks that play the Fantasticar, but they're also just Mystic Forge combo, and then cited in over 10 different archetypes, and that is a presence for great concern. These are not, it's not that the Fantasticar created a Fantasticar deck that people have to be ready for. It's that the Fantasticar gave a super dramatic, super awful dimension to many different decks, and that's why they don't like it. And then they say something really interesting here. First of all, they're not particularly worried that supplemental sets create cards that are successful in Legacy and Vintage. That's not the problem. But with such significant impact, regardless of the product it's included in, far exceeds acceptable limits, we are constantly working to improve how we create Magic cards, and we have introduced a new step in the design process that focuses on non-rotation formats. Wow. We've been told for decades straight up, there is not the manpower inside what we do at the pace we do it at, all the things we have to account for, to also think about Legacy and Vintage. We're going to design the cards that we think are good for Standard, for Limited, for Modern in the case of a Horizon style set. We're going to target the things we want to target, and we'll use the ban list to clean up anything that gets through. This is a very interesting sentence here. I wonder what that section looks like. I wonder if they're going to try to assign that job to each team designing each set, or are they going to assign like one or two Legacy experts? Are they going to contract out opinions of Legacy experts who don't necessarily work for Wizards? All of these are things that are possible and things that we've seen hinted at in the past, and it's cool to say out loud, we're doing this on purpose. And the very next sentence, we have seen positive results from this new approach, which was introduced after the development cycle of Fantasticar, and we believe that this type of risk in eternal formats will be caught in advance in the future. Very cool. And then the last paragraph echoes another thing that I've been concerned about specifically, which is the next ban window's proximity to Eternal Weekend. The next ban window is October 12th, and the first Eternal Weekend is the last week of October, the 31st, and a couple days before that, which would create about 2.5 weeks between that ban and the main events of Eternal Weekend kicking in. And what I really didn't want, like, I wasn't sure personally if the data were there to support banning Fantasticar already. To me, it seemed like it had settled into mostly Doomsday, Storm, and maybe the Dimir deck. Like, to me, it seemed like the Dimir deck was falling off even a little bit. I didn't know if that was enough. But what I really didn't want was for it to not get banned now, and it did get banned October 12th. Because if this is part of the metagame, it's time to dig in on Eternal Weekend. I would have been practicing my Doomsday piles. I would have been trying to learn how to use this tool if was going to be what we were doing at Eternal Weekend. And it would have been really annoying to spend the next 2 months learning all that just for it to be erased at the last minute when we could have done this now. And they basically echo that sentiment here. As we approach the time of year for Eternal Weekend once again, our decisions are made with that in mind. We want everyone to be able to enjoy Eternal without any worries at this event. Love that. This also feels like kind of a lesson learned from Entomb, which they called out up here already. This dance they did around dealing with Reanimator for good, for as long as they did it, which messed up Legacy for a long time. I appreciate the vibe of, I think we're going to have to deal with this, let's just deal with it.
This video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, the easiest way to build Magic decks online. Moxfield supports over 30 formats, including Legacy and everything else you'll see on this channel. There's multiple customizations so you can interact with your deck how you want. Views such as text, grid, or stacks, and groupings like type, subtype, color, color identity, even artist. The site offers light mode, dark mode, and so much more. However you want to see your deck, Moxfield can provide it for you. Follow my Moxfield to keep up with the channel and what I'm playing in paper. I'll see you there.
And that takes us to Vintage. where the Fantasticar is restricted. I think this was a slam dunk. I very rarely in life would bet, money or bet my life or bet anything important on whether action would be taken by Wizards on a card. But this is as close to a sure bet as there was. Vintage was so healthy for years. It was thriving. There was a bunch of different decks, and the Fantasticar immediately nuked that metagame into the trash in a way that was really unfun and unsatisfying from a format that was awesome up to that point. Here, they basically immediately acknowledge workshop decks featuring Dazzling Flesh Scraper, aka Glaring Flesh Raker. This was the place it went. This was a tier 1 deck before the Fantasticar was printed, and then it went right in there with basically no structural changes required. But then they said the same thing they said about Legacy. The fact it's appearing in decks other than chop decks is a worrying situation. Here they echo the statement above that the Fantasticar, third spelling, this is the coolest one, the Fantasticar. They say that at the time this card was printed, didn't get any special attention and went through the normal review process. Once again, implying that there is now a different process that a card like this would not make it through. They hope these restrictions will prevent Fantasticar from being included in every deck, while some decks will likely to continue to include the one copy. Much more difficult to build a deck around this card. And I think that's really important too. In Vintage, cards don't really get banned, with the exception of like anti-cards, dexterity cards, and Lures of the Dream Den. Kind of the vision of this format is everything's cool. Some stuff you can only have one of, though. So a restriction, everyone was expecting this. And restricted cards in Vintage, it comes with the territory when you play Vintage that these cards are going to get you sometimes, where it's like, yeah, my opponent just had Tinker on turn 1. You only get one Tinker in your deck, and they had it. What am I going to do? But the Fantasticar, it's not like Tinker. It's not like Time Vault. It's not like you could just put this in a deck that otherwise can just do other stuff, and it's very powerful when you find it. This is a dedication to something. Maybe Doomsday will continue to play the one copy, but even like the one copy in Raker shops. This build of Raker shops, and most of them, oh no, the links are weird. Okay, here it is. Gitaxian Probe, another restricted card in Vintage. A deck that shops decks normally don't play, but it's a free spell when you have 4 copies of the Fantasticar on your deck. Is it worth it to play Gitaxian Probe in the games just in case you draw your one restricted Fantasticar? This now creates cascading deck building decisions that aren't just as simple as I cut the 3 cards I can't play anymore for 3 other good cards and I resend in the same list. This is obviously going to happen, and I'm glad it did. That's Vintage and Legacy with the secret Japanese description of the decisions. And then I will talk about Pauper a little bit at the very end. No changes here. And once again, there is a phenomenal, long, detailed article citing real data and specific numbers from Gavin. As much written about Pauper here as there was about basically all the other formats combined in the main release thing. This is the Pauper format panel being awesome once again. And basically, I'm not going to go through this too hard, but Sneaky Snacker is a card that has gotten a lot of heat in the Pauper community for quite a while now. People have been nicknaming it Deadly Dispute, which is a banned card. There's other jokes where it's like the best red card from Modern Horizons 3. This card is very strong, it's very annoying, and it has changed the metagame because you have to be able to address this thing. And Gavin basically spends paragraph after paragraph saying Paupergeddon, Pauper Genesis, Circuito Liga Magic, God of Pauper, just multi-continent big Pauper events where Sneaky Snacker was not a problem. Like in Paupergeddon, for example, the biggest of these, 1,100 players, 0 Sneaky Snackers in top 8, going down to the top 64, only 11 decks in top 64 with Snacker. There was 1 in the Pauper Genesis top 8 with only 7 more if you look at the top 64. Magic Online challenges, Snacker took 5 of 24 possible top 8 spots of the last 3 challenges before this update. And basically the call out is, yeah, this card's strong, but people have adjusted to it. And then in addition to the win rates, he talks about This is something I've brought up on Eternal Glory podcast when cards are changing the format, even though they're not necessarily winning. Even if Snacker isn't winning, has it warped around it? And he says, exile based removal, graveyard hate are at a higher premium now in your flex slots, but it doesn't warp the entire metagame the way Fall from Favor, Swift Spear, or other banned cards have. And then is Sneaky Snacker making Pauper less fun? Harder to quantify as it's about feelings. Snacker is fun to play with as it empowers a bunch of draw 2 cards at frustrating to play against because you have to fight through a fairy horde over and over. Overall, Gavin, this is a quote, Gavin would say it's a little more unfun than it is fun, but it's certainly within the tolerable bands of Pauper play patterns. And has it homogenized the format? Strong no. Format looks diverse, a wide variety of strategies being playable and doing well. And if you choose to read all these words, you could go do it. I'm not going to read the article to you, but these are strong arguments from basically every direction that Sneaky Snacker is currently within the bands of what's okay for Pauper. And then at the very end, Fonder's Ornament was on a trial unban, and they said this card's been totally fine and will remain unbanned. Cool. I have not played with or against this card even once since it got trial unbanned. Seems like a fine card to be legal. And there it is. That was a pretty quick and painless update, unless you're a Pauper player who just really wanted stuff to happen. I guess as far as legacy goes, the things that I have said in the past that I would like banned, like Tameo, like the One Ring, is Flow State actually okay? This ban update coincides with the release of The Hobbit, which puts Bilbo into the format, which looks like Dreadhorde Arcanist, which is a card that's banned. There's a lot of cards that are legal right now that look like cards that are banned, and the Fantasticar was in the way of talking about any of those cards. This is something I feel like broken record. I just keep saying over and over again for the last 2 years almost, where it's like, yeah, there might be problems down here in the normal level stuff. Like Tameo might be too good among fair deck strategies, but fair decks aren't entirely viable with the Fantasticar legal. Fair decks weren't viable with Tron legal. Fair decks weren't entirely viable with Reanimate legal, or with Entomb, the Reanimator package, and Grief and Psychic Frog and all that before it. So just the continuing the process of scraping off the obvious, this is completely out of bounds stuff. So maybe we get a chance to focus on the probably out of bounds, but currently fine stuff. Not much more to say about that. As usual, the Eternal Glory podcast is a place where you could find me and Thraben You and Bryant Cook of the Epic Storm talking every other Friday about this sort of thing in detail in between these updates. If you're not listening to that, but you like articles like this, go check it out. And I'm going to leave this here. Everyone, thanks for watching. See you next time.